Eala earns it the hard way. From love 3 down first set. Lefty shape, stubborn defense, and smart claycraft to outplay the 31st seed, Wang Xinyu, under the statues. 6-4, 6-3 in an hour and 26 minutes. She avenges her semi-final Auckland loss, where she fumbled match point in January to Wang and rolls into the Rome third round.
Stop whatever you are doing right now. Seriously, put the phone down, lock the screen, close every single tab, because what just unfolded on the red clay of Rome is the kind of moment that only comes around once in a generation, and if you blink, you're going to miss exactly why it matters. A 20-year-old Filipino prodigy just walked onto one of the most iconic tennis courts on the entire planet, stared down a top 30-seeded Chinese powerhouse, and did not just beat her. She broke her. Completely, emotionally, devastatingly. And when it was all over, when the final ball had been struck and the dust had literally settled on the crushed red brick of the Foro Italico, Xinyu Wang did not walk to the net with composure. She walked to the net in tears, uncontrollable, face buried in towel, absolute sobbing tears. And the casual fans watching at home had absolutely no idea what they had just witnessed. But you are about to find out everything. Alexandra Eala defeated the 31st seed Xinyu Wang 6-4, 6-3 in 1 hour and 26 minutes at the Italian Open in Rome. On paper, that scoreline looks clean, it looks comfortable, it looks like a straightforward second-round victory for a young player coming through the draw. But that scoreline is one of the most misleading pieces of information you will read today, because the story of what actually happened on that court, the psychological warfare, the tactical genius, the emotional reckoning, is something that no two-sentence match recap will ever come close to capturing. And that is exactly why we are here, because someone has to tell you the truth. To truly understand the magnitude of what Alexandra Eala accomplished in Rome, you have to travel back exactly 118 days. January 2026, the WTA Auckland Classic, semi-finals. Fast, slick hard courts in New Zealand, a completely different universe from the slow red clay of Italy. These two exact same players stepped onto that court and went to war. Eala took the first set. She was in control. She looked composed, dangerous, like a player ready to make her first WTA major semifinal final. And then Xinyu Wang turned on the machine. The flat, relentless, suffocating power that has made her one of the most feared hitters on the professional tour ground the young Filipina completely down. Wang won the match. Eala went home with a loss and something far more painful, the haunting memory of a match point fumbled, a victory snatched away, a massive moment that slipped right through her fingers. For 4 months, Alexandra Eala carried that loss with her everywhere she went. 4 months of practice sessions, travel days, warm-up tournaments, all with that Auckland result sitting in the back of her mind like a stone she could not put down. And then the Italian Open draw was released, and there was Xinyu Wang waiting, right there in the second round. The entire tennis world held its breath, because everyone wanted to know the same thing. Was Eala going to let that previous defeat haunt her, or was she going to walk onto that court and use every ounce of that pain as fuel? But here is what made this moment even heavier. It was not just Wang standing in her way, it was the narrative, because the mainstream media, the access journalists, the lazy headline writers, the people who had spent the entire European spring writing Eala's professional obituary had been pushing a very specific story about this young woman. They called it a second-round slump. They pointed to early exits. They questioned her mental toughness. They said she lacked the veteran grit required to string together consecutive victories at the WTA 1000 level. The harshest voices went even further, declaring that Alexandra Eala was simply a highly hyped prospect who would eventually drown in the deep, heavy, unforgiving waters of elite European clay. That was the story being written about her while she was preparing for Rome, and she knew it. So when she stepped onto that iconic court at the Foro Italico, she was carrying an almost impossible weight. She was not just fighting Xinyu Wang, she was fighting every critic who had ever doubted her. She was fighting the ghost of Auckland, and she was fighting the astronomical expectations of an entire nation, because the Philippines does not just support Alexandra Eala, they have made her a symbol of global sporting hope. The pressure on this 20-year-old girl was the kind of pressure that breaks most people before they even pick up a racket. But here is what the critics completely fail to understand. Alexandra Eala is not most people. She is a direct product of the Rafa Nadal Academy, trained by the greatest minds in clay court tennis, built around one fundamental belief, that suffering is not a sign of weakness. Suffering is the exact currency you need to purchase a victory on the red dirt. And then came the tennis, and it was an absolute masterclass. To understand why, you first need to understand the battlefield, because the Foro Italico in Rome is not a normal tennis court. It is a slow, heavy, meticulously watered gladiator pit sitting at near sea level, surrounded by thick, humid air, where the crushed red brick completely absorbs pace and makes it mathematically impossible to hit a pure flat winner through the court. Now consider Xinyu Wang's game. 5 feet 11.5 inches tall, one of the purest, most devastating flat ball strikers on the entire WTA tour. On a fast hard court, her shots skid through the surface like laser beams, taking all reaction time away from her opponents. But on Roman clay, the physics change entirely. When Wang tried to fire her flat, penetrating drives, the heavy surface slowed the ball down and caused it to sit up perfectly in the strike zone, completely neutralizing the single biggest weapon in her arsenal. And Eala saw it immediately. She recognized the atmospheric advantage, and she exploited it without mercy. Instead of trying to match Wang's power, which would have been a catastrophic mistake, Eala did something that requires both courage and elite-level intelligence. She wrapped her racket around the outside of the tennis ball and generated thousands of revolutions per minute of heavy, violent, left-handed topspin. And when those balls hit the Roman dirt, they did not just bounce, they exploded upward. They kicked violently above Wang's shoulders, forcing the tall Chinese player to constantly make contact from well above her ideal biomechanical strike zone. With every single shot, Eala was dismantling the structural foundation of Wang's game. The high, looping, heavy balls deep into the center of the court completely neutralized Wang's ability to use her power, and the tactical masterclass began from the very first service game and never, ever relented. What followed was not a tennis match in the traditional sense. It was a war of attrition. Eala pulled Wang into grueling 15 to 20 short rallies, methodically moving her from corner to corner, never panicking, never rushing, never giving her opponent a rhythm to settle into. She secured her service breaks by exposing something that Wang's coaches must have spent the entire flight home analyzing: her lateral movement limitations on slippery clay. Eala used a wicked skidding backhand slice to force Wang to bend her knees to their absolute maximum and generate her own pace from the lowest, most uncomfortable point possible. The rallies stopped being explosive, crowd-pleasing exchanges. They mutated into suffocating physical wars. The lactic acid started building up in Wang's legs, the heavy breathing started, and then the unforced error started, creeping into a stat sheet like a slow, inevitable virus. Eala was not just winning, she was suffocating, and her execution during the match was nothing short of extraordinary. She protected her reconstructed service motion when the pressure was at its most intense. She stepped aggressively inside the baseline every time Wang left the ball sitting short, taking it early on the rise and driving clean winners down the line. She refused to retreat into a defensive shell when the score was tight. She solved problems in real time on the biggest stage she had ever stood on against the exact opponent who had broken her heart just 4 months earlier. And when the final ball was struck, when the match was officially over, Alexandra Eala had done something the media said she could not do. She had completely demolished the second-round slump narrative and sent Xinyu Wang to the net with absolutely nothing left to give. And that is where the moment happened, the moment that broke the internet, the moment that casual fans could not understand and that every serious tennis observer will remember for a very long time. Xinyu Wang walked to the net and she completely fell apart. The tears were not subtle. They were not the polite, dignified tears of a frustrated competitor. She wept intensely, face buried in her towel. She walked off the court in a state of absolute emotional devastation. And the comment sections and social media feeds immediately filled with confused reactions from people who could not understand why a top 30 seeded professional would respond to a match loss with that level of grief. But here is the truth, and it is a truth that cuts right to the heart of what professional tennis actually is. Wang did not cry because she played poorly. She played with everything she had.
She cried because she gave every single ounce of her physical and mental energy, played with complete desperation and aggression, and it was still not enough. She cried because she realized in real time, standing on the other side of the net from a 20-year-old girl, that the formula she used to beat Eala in Auckland no longer existed. In 4 months, Eala had evolved past her completely. The game plan Wang walked onto that court with had been shredded to pieces before she even had a chance to execute it. And that realization, that your absolute best is no longer good enough against someone you previously defeated, is one of the most psychologically devastating experiences a professional athlete can ever endure. Tennis is a fundamentally cruel sport. It is built entirely on solitary failure. And when you step onto a slow clay court and discover that your greatest weapon has been completely neutralized by a player who simply outsmarted, outlasted, and outmaneuvered you at every geometric angle, there is nowhere to hide. The tears of Xinyu Wang are not a symbol of weakness. They are the greatest possible testament to the terrifying tactical brilliance of Alexandra Eala. Because here is what this victory actually means. It is the most mathematically valuable stepping stone of Eala's entire career. She proved she can neutralize a seeded player on the slowest surface in the world. She proved she can execute a disciplined, complex game plan for 2 full hours without a single catastrophic mental lapse. And she proved that the agonizing lessons from past defeats have been permanently encoded into her competitive DNA. The mainstream media will run a scoreline. They will write 2 sentences and move on to the next match. But the tennis community sees it. The Philippines sees it. The coaches who have built her see it. And most importantly, the rest of the professional tour sees it. Alexandra Eala is no longer a hyped prospect riding potential. She is a battle-tested, psychologically hardened, mathematically dangerous competitor who has officially put the entire European clay court swing on notice. Anyone who draws her name in the next round is not getting a routine match. They are getting a very, very long day on the dirt. And the story of how a 20-year-old from the Philippines walked on to the iconic courts of Rome, silenced every critic, avenged her biggest loss, and reduced a seeded opponent to tears, that story is only just beginning.